Hey, what does a poet look like? Maybe a little guy with glasses and beard and a mustache. Poets are people too. And they do all kinds of things, and they come from all different walks of life. Well, our poet today comes from construction, builds houses, rebuilds houses, and he writes amazing poetry about cows and pastures and being a boy. My name is Vin Dacquino, and our next guest is Stephen Haggerty. Stephen, let's talk writing.
I'm excited to be here.
And I'm excited to have you here. You and I go back to the workshop. I've seen and heard your work, love your poems, but I don't know all that much about who you were. Tell us a little bit about your life, Steve.
All right, well, I lived a double life, and I think life is a process of figuring out who we are, who I am, and double life meaning, I'm trying to be a little bit funny, but for 10 months a year and a lot of weekends, I found myself, after school ended in June, found myself in Vermont with my family in this little town, and it was 6 miles back on a dirt road. And once you got to the paved road, then you started going somewhere.
Whoa.
And there were 7 kids, so we spent a lot of time.
So you were one of 7?
Right.
Wow.
So we used to have this TV with those rabbit ears, and you could get 3 channels from Schenectady. And so what would happen is we'd be watching, and 2 of the channels would go. So we had 1 left. There was a choice. And then at some point, after watching Hollywood Squares and The Rifleman, if those rabbit ears scissored, there was nothing, just, you know, white shock waves on the TV. So what were we going to do? And I had a brother, John, who was very active outdoors guy, and also 2 other brothers. We were 4 of us within 3 years, the Irish twins, and then another one, and then shortly after.
Irish twins.
Oh, that's when you have, they're born less than a year apart.
Wow, so they call them Irish twins.
Right, so within 2 years, 3 of them were born.
Wow.
And then 2 years later, myself and my brother John was the outdoorsman. He was picking up snakes, and he'd be the type, you're focused on what you're doing, looking at the ground. He'd be seeing eagles and hawks and pulling snakes and, you know, out of the grass, and I got to like it. I was more a daydreamer, but he really taught me how to like the outdoors. So what are you going to do when there's no Hollywood Squares and it's nice out? You know, we eat our couple pieces of buttered toast and venture out and spend, you know, a lot of times full half days, whole days walking through the mountains. We used to like to walk through this brook, you know, like walk a mile or 2 down in our sneakers and make
Following
dams.
brooks was a thing I did.
Yeah.
Loved doing it.
Right. So, you know, these kids, like others, being out in the country, but we were always trying to catch fish. We never got one on the line. There were some in there, so we used the net once, and we found out that was illegal. So one of my stories is about my brother was determined to catch one. So you have to read the story, though, to find out how he did.
Is that one of the ones you're going to share with us? Or?
No, that's actually a non-fiction.
So we have to buy the book to get that one?
Short story, yes.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
But I guess the main thing that goes into this book, half a mile up the road was a farm, and we were so eager to get there. You know, it was usually June 21st.
Now, you had some famous people that lived around your area, right?
Right. Well, actually,
at one time.
Yeah, Robert Frost lived about 10 miles down the road. Of course, he was gone, you know,
yeah, he was
by the
long
time
dead.
I was there. You know, people in town, they knew Norman Rockwell's models. You know, I knew a few of them. That was very inspiring.
Wow.
We'd see him around. Didn't know him well, but
and Grandma
talked
Moses,
to him.
too?
Yeah, she lived in Hoosick Falls, which was
Wasn't
like
far
20
from where
miles.
you were?
But her grandson, I believe it was her grandson, not her great-grandson, would he was over one time on my friend's farm to change tractor tires.
Wow.
Now, a tractor tire is, about, was it 5 feet high?
Yeah, they're
so that's
huge. Yeah.
a real art. But when we were little, this farmer who lived up the road, his family went back, I believe, to like 1720. I've seen,
Wow.
historic documents that they were there in the 1790s. His name was Millard Smith. He's gone now. He was born in 1900. But we, as little kids, worked on his farm for a quarter here, 50 cents here.
Wow.
And I remember one
What
of the...
did you have to do there?
Oh, we'd go out in the field and chase the cows in. And my older brothers, I was always at the back because, they were older. And sometimes we were nervous, but, we'd clap and yell at them. And if we got them into the barn, we got a quarter each.
Wow,
So,
that's funny.
But then one of my real delightful moments was when I was 8, and I was able to muscle a bale of hay up on the wagon.
Wow.
These older brothers,
Oh,
I wasn't
yeah.
about to be outdone. They were throwing them up on the wagon. But it was a whole immersion for 10 weeks into this experience. We didn't go many other places till, we were about 13, and then we were set out in search of fun and romance. And we walked long distances, sometimes a good 6 miles to go swimming.
Oh,
and that's
wow.
not one of these old fables. But anyway, through that process, when I say a double life, I was so immersed in that. And I grew up in Old Greenwich, Connecticut, and many of the people, my friends' parents, were television executives and advertising executives. But I spend most of my time socializing in Vermont with the farming and other people, other flatlanders who would vacation up there, and just, a wonderful small town of people.
So your book is called Cows in the Fog,
Right.
and it's about those experiences growing up, and you capture it beautifully.
Oh, thanks.
Get a good sense. You brought a couple poems. Give us a little taste of what you captured in verse.
Okay. Well, I'll read one. One of the things, if you're on a farm, and a lot of people know this, but some don't, bulls are dangerous animals. I mean, they're one of the most dangerous, and they'll fool you, be real nice and turn on you. This farmer Millard one time, this is the story we were told, that he may have even told us, I don't remember, but he was pinned up against a barn with a bull about 20 feet away, and the thing was, getting ready to gore him and just about to start going after him. That, the bull could kill you, but his farming assistant, Richard, was off a little distance. He started hollering, and he was able to divert the bull. But so very young, I knew,
Don't
watch
mess
out.
with a bull.
Yeah. And so anyway, this one's called Fence Breakers. On a blackened August evening, the smell of fermenting fruit coated the sticky air as the young man searched for a bull that busted through the farmer's fence. The air swished. A presence? He turned and took a jolt upon finding himself staring into the eyes of the rogue bull, staggering through a grove, intoxicated on apples, whiskey drool running from his mouth. A lush mountain pasture, 30 cows with white aprons and calves dancing on new legs. Shouldn't that suffice to content a bull? The farmer's chore for the young man and me, move the fence back some yards so as to sign over to the bull the space where he had trespassed. Outrageous! I had pledged to never again move a boundary for a fence breaker, opportunist of any type. Should we not keep the fence as set and follow the policy of repair and reinforce? Otherwise, what statement do we make? Having told the story of the encounter with a bull with widened eyes, the young man is operating a chainsaw, sharpening locust branches with thick ridged hides, most durable of native growth. I grip one end to hold them still. Too late to question the farmers. Their minds are made, I'm sure. The noisy saw spews the fumes of my regret. Our pliers pull the rusted staples. We yank up the old posts, and 30 paces back, we sledgehammer new locusts down and fastened the resplendent silver wire, careful to keep our fingers clear of the steel scorpions. Leaning on the sledge, the day's work done, I admit, though loath to do so, that I am again an appeaser. But I console myself. Sometimes letting go of the taken makes one less miserable than trying to wrestle it back. Going home, the silent voices of the farmers whisper, "That bull has no voice like a human, no bark like a dog, no paws like a cat to plead for a door to be open. Can we blame him for busting fences?"
So your poems have messages.
Oh, yes. You know, I wouldn't say I have a stock way of doing it because a lot of them are different, but I like to get some philosophical thing to talk about. Like, I would like to do some more teaching with kids, and there's a talking point that naturally comes about. You know, are people breaking our fences through the day? What do we do? If somebody's breaking a boundary with me, do I tell them to cut it out? Do I get away?
So if people are pushing the fence, do you move the fence for them?
Right.
Or do you push them back?
Right, and it's always a question that I think
And in this case, the bull got his way.
You know, what are you going to do?
Yeah, really. He's a bull, man.
Well, he needed more room for apples. And
So this is a no bull story.
that's right. And so the time I was up there, we worked on several different farms, and this is one of the old stories. And so, but the other thing, I don't know, were you going to ask me about my inspiration?
Yeah.
Okay. So it all comes, I don't say too much about this, but my father was in the music business, and when I was a kid, I would sit in his office, my brothers and I, he'd give us a piece of music paper to write stories on, and on his desk would be these musicals that he worked for Richard Rodgers of Rodgers and Hammerstein. Over a 30-year period, there was a show, Victory at Sea, right after World War II, and then all the way up through Sound of Music. So I'd see these music from those shows with a stamp on it, Sound of Music, and then some of the old stuff, Annie, Get Your Gun. And the last one that I remember was You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And on that, my father worked with the orchestra. So we had all this inspiration, and he was a guy who oozed inspiration. And at 5 years old, I have a postcard that he sent of a Beatrice Potter postcard, and on it, it says, "Can you write a story about that?" Wow. So when I went to school, you know, I was already at an early age interested in stories, and I remember in first grade, you know, they told us to write a story, and I wrote twice as much as anybody else, and the teacher made me stand up, and I was so excited I could hardly speak. And then in fourth grade, don't ask me how good I was at math, but, you know, there's two types of people in the world. People are good at English, and two that are good at math. Well, I won the writing contest in my school, and for fourth grade. And as I got older in English in high school, I took a test. I was exempt from English, but I took it anyway. That was my thing. And when I was 20, going to Southern Vermont College, I started taking writing classes with a 90-year-old nun, 88, 90. And she taught the basics of English 101, and I took American literature classes, and she stuck to all the basics and really drilled them into me, dialogue and narrative. And
it's funny, I had a nun that inspired me as well, and it was Sister Christie, who knew that I was into Shakespeare, and especially the Shakespearean sonnets. And she gave me a copy of the Shakespearean sonnets that she had when she was a little girl. And when she gave it to me, she was like probably almost 80. And, you know, I believe I still have those sonnets today.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah, it's so much fun writing poetry and learning about other people's and sharing it. That's really the...
So when did you get real serious about your poetry?
Well, I first was a magazine editor. Maybe I should just mention quickly about that.
Yeah, talk about those. Yeah. As a magazine editor, what kind of things did you edit?
Okay, so when I was in college, I was a senior at this fledgling college called Southern Vermont College. It was a new college, and I started writing about sports in my senior year, typing these things up, taking pictures, took them to the local newspaper. The guy looked at them and gave me a check each time.
Wow.
And that led to a scholarship. I got to the University of South Carolina, and a job, so I went tuition free, and I had a job there as the assistant for the South Carolina High School Press Association. So I judged contests throughout Carolina and drove around. We had some conventions and things, so it was really neat. And then out of that, I was in the American Society of Magazine Editors internship program. A gentleman, William Emerson Jr., was the last editor of the original Saturday Evening Post, and he gave me the application. I filled it out, and so I got accepted for that. And then after I did that, I had one other great writer at the University of South Carolina, William Price Fox, a Southern humorist who taught at the University of Iowa with Kurt Vonnegut. And one of the things he taught me is if you're writing something, there should be something funny somewhere in it.
Really?
Yes, that was his big thing. And so after that internship, I was at the University of South Carolina, and we were told a man from McGraw-Hill was coming down, and he was going to do a seminar. So he got done, and he looked for me, and he said, "Would you like to come to New York to work at McGraw-Hill?" Wow. As an editorial trainee. So I was there, like, say 4 years, and I didn't like writing all the time. So I found my way into handyman and construction.
Yeah, you made a complete switch. You went from writing to carpentry and handyman.
Right, and then I'd be doing some writing on the side. I always wanted to write fiction and poetry, and I never gave it up. But when you have your own small construction business and you're writing estimates after dinner, there's not too much to do. I wrote some things for some other magazines, some inspirational stuff. Like one of them was about a woman who got run over by a boat propeller and had 160 stitches in her face.
Whoa.
It was an inspirational story. And
wow. So was that your first real story?
Which? I'm sorry.
About the stitches?
No, that was, I did some other things after I left McGraw-Hill. But
when did you get into the poetry part of all of this?
Okay, the poetry. Well, Sister Barbara from Southern Vermont College read some of my things I had written, and a poem I had written, and she said, if you want to, you could be a professional writer. So, but I got into poetry there, but writing the magazine and newspaper stuff, I got off
Did you
that.
do the poetry about the Vermont then, too?
I wrote one of them back in the early 90s called Terry Brook.
Oh, wow.
And that's about the brook inspiring the whole valley on a foggy, clammy November day. And so when I really got into the poetry, to make a long story short, I'll get on long story short later, you'll see why. But I was writing fiction. I've written 2 books of fiction that are 90% done. And I think they'll go, but I don't have all the circuitry in the brain to put the finishing touches on. I think I will, like, in a year. It's just a lot. So, but a book of poetry is a whole bunch of small projects. Is it much easier? I don't know.
Like a handyman. You like these little projects?
Right.
Go in, get them done, get out.
Right. However, is it easier? I don't know. Some of these I've written, one of them 17 times I've rewritten it.
Wow.
To get it right. And so I was walking with my daughter one day and talking about the pond, and I say, do you like ponds? And she doesn't realize it, but she gave me the information to write that poem. That is so short, I could read it.
Okay, good. Go for it. I'd love to hear it.
Let's see here. Okay, Ponds, a poem for Christina. To my daughter, ponds are a delight. When water is freezing, smash. When heat is scorching, splash. In autumn, a canvas of colors to view. In spring, skunk cabbage shines green, but P.U. So anyway, something around that time happened that I'd be getting ideas out of nowhere. And I think that's part of the writing process.
Yeah.
When you work at it long enough, you know, you develop an awareness, and you develop all these skills from writing. It's almost like if you were playing tennis and you play so much, all of a sudden you do some swing way over your head and the ball goes over and you say, how did I do that? So once that happened, I decided to write more poems, and a gentleman named Vin Dacquino looked at my poems.
Oh, I know that guy.
And he said, you should write more about this childhood, this 8-year-old boy
Yep.
In Vermont. And so I did that, and I found with each one getting better, because when you're a magazine writer and all, you see things more in the literal world.
Right.
And I began, the editor for this book, Jeff Edrick, is a very figurative with these metaphors. You wonder where he comes up with them. So he and I working together, I mean, he was a big help.
Yeah. Oh, he's a good writer too.
Right. So I began with that experience I had, and with him, to get away from, you know, having to explain everything twice.
Yeah,
This is
just right from
business
your
writing.
heart, right from your inner eye.
I love business writing, but this is different.
Yep.
And so I'm really amazed myself at what I was able to do.
One of my favorite poems of yours is the one about the turkey vulture.
Right. Oh, thanks.
Do you have that?
Oh, sure. Let's see. Okay. Page 35. Okay. Now, I know we don't preface poems much, but this is one thing my brother in Vermont, he'd see all these things in the sky while I was daydreaming. And I remember seeing these turkey vultures, and recently, before I wrote this program, I had an encounter. Before I wrote this book, I had an encounter with one. It's called the Turkey Vulture. You are a king of the sky this morning, gliding below the blue expanse, your wide brown wingspan stretched, eyes peering downward at the forest. You circle, poised to swoop, but created to take only the dead or frail. Bronze breast plump and proud, rounded feathers edged in gold, under heaven's streaming light. Your wingtips silver, steer while scoping the brush between the groves. A mere tilt steadies your span. Later, we meet on a country road. You are no longer a king, but a beggar instead, in my lane pecking carrion, perched upon the putrid mound, and now your plumage appears gray, like the sky before its end. In a shady tunnel under tender branches, innocent light pokes through, your dark side suddenly exposed. You are someone I thought I knew. Begrudgingly, you pull your featherless pink head from the hole you have pecked in the black striped carcass, but you hold your place and defy me with black eyes. Dining hour would have been so much less complicated had this raccoon exhaled its last breath in a quiet meadow. Life is hard enough. Why must nature torment you, serving your meal in the middle of the road? My wheels draw closer, and I fear I will run you over. You wouldn't risk death for a meal, would you? Nonchalant in this pointless game of dare, despite my tire's crushing power, you eyeball me, and sparse springy hairs of white bristle on that pink head above your puffed breast. What incongruity! Is it by design or by trick of nature that this peculiar head of yours is suited for the shape of a turkey, not as a crown for your noble body? If your tiny pink head weren't running the show, perhaps you wouldn't be so desperate to eat meals in the road. But who am I to judge? Your labor is as honorable as mine. Move, I holler, move. But you just don't care. And now it may be too late. I stomp on the brakes and my car screeches to a halt. You reluctantly flap thrice, and your gangly wings, once gilded with gold, as you circle under that blue expanse, struggle to lift you off the road. Your eyes follow me as I pass, and we both know that we are all both beggar and king.
Beautiful. Absolutely one of my favorites of yours. You are indeed a poet. Fascinates me that you've chosen to put bread on your table through contracting. That by day you build houses and by night you build verse. I love that idea, and I love that there is another side of you that sort of comes out at night. And it's not really a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
I hope not.
No, really. Because you're creating both times. It's just completely different things. And it's a great message for people out there who say, you know, well, I work as a postmaster, and I'm going to write poems at night. Yeah. That there's different sides of us. And we have to address those different sides and allow ourselves to be creative. And I love what you do with the writing group and how you not only comment on what others write, but you're willing to take what they say about your work, go home, work it through. One of the things I always like to say to writers, you don't write poems, you work poems. And it's very important to understand that writing is an art. And you have to be willing to revise, edit, look at it, turn it over, write it again, and you do that very well. I've seen you take pieces, take them apart, put them back together again in beautiful ways. How do you feel about the actual act of writing?
All right, so when I was at McGraw-Hill, I had this very seasoned editor, and I remember him telling us that the word in French for editor is rédacteur.
Ah, rédacteur, which is
reducer.
Reducer, yeah.
So like these poems, like the Turkey Vulture, I mean, that had all kinds of old feathers in it that I had to trim.
Yeah.
And you try to take away every non-useful word. And sometimes you get people that'll tell you, take every adverb and adjective out. We'll take most of them. But if you read some great poets, they don't go to that point of removing every word, but every adjective or adverb, but take away as much as you can.
To the final piece.
Now, if you're in a cluttered room in somebody's house and it's absolutely beautiful, the room, and it's all clutter, you're not going to see the beauty of the room. You might feel the warmth and friendship of a friend, but you won't.
Well, speaking of the beauty of the room, you have created beauty in Cows in the Fog. It's a wonderful book, filled with excellent poems, and we need to read those. Do yourself a favor, read Cows in the Fog, and stay tuned to this station for even more authors. Steve, we can't thank you enough for being with us here today. Keep writing, keep doing what you do, build by day and build by night. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, and you've really inspired me. You and the Mayapack Writers Group.
I'm glad to hear that. Keep coming to the group. Keep writing. You start writing. Do what it is you do best. Don't let anybody stop you from being you. Steve, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Great job. You did exactly what you needed to do.
Oh, thanks.
Got a chance to read some of the work, even my favorite work, which is
How long were we here? 5 minutes?
I know, that sure felt like it. That 28 minutes flew. And right now we are already in the black screen, so we did a great job. Nice work.
All right, thanks.
All right. Hello. So, beautiful. Well done.
I kept thinking, oh, these people in Vermont, I better watch out what I say, because I'm going up there for a week.
Yeah,
so
that's right. They're going to be
that's
looking
why I
for
mentioned I worked on a few farms, so the guy with a bull.
Yeah, with the bull.
I
Yeah,
mean,
'cause-
you do have to be careful.
Yeah, yeah.
Unless you
know,
get into a controversial subject.
people
and,
did some of those things. Yeah, I know. And you'd be surprised that some people do get their nose out of joint over little things. And I've run into that with some of my work, too. That's why I want to watch out for this new one that I'm doing, the one on George Denny. Got to be careful, because George Denny...
The legal system's involved,
Yeah,
huh?
yeah, legal system's involved, too, so you got to be careful. You know, I made that comment, a couple people got nervous with, where I say, it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to hang one. And they did hang George Denny.
You can't be too sensitive either, right?
No, you can't. And, you know, the truth is what it is.
That's why I did this one first. There's no names or anything.
Yeah.
So I get used to it, and I'll hear some comments from people, and, you know, the old Farmer Miller